Welcome to The Explainer. I'm so thrilled to have you with us today. All right, let's just dive right in, shall we? We live in a world where gaming is, well, it's practically a universal language now. It's a massive part of modern culture, a great way to socialize, unwind, and for a lot of folks, it's a genuine passion. But for a very specific segment of the population, that passion kind of morphs into something far more consuming. Today, we're going on a really fascinating evidence-based journey into our gaming habits. We're going to unpack the hard science behind gaming disorder, using some incredible new research to understand exactly how it's diagnosed and, crucially, how it can be successfully treated. 4.6%. That's the number we need to talk about. In a massive, incredibly rigorous diagnostic study of adolescents, researchers found that 4.6% of them actually met the clinical criteria for internet gaming disorder. Now, you might be thinking, that sounds small, but it's really not a marginal number. To put that into perspective, that represents literally millions of young people worldwide whose relationship with gaming has fundamentally disrupted their daily lives. So, this brings us to the really big central question of this explainer. Where exactly is the line between a passionate hobby and a clinical disorder? I mean, if playing a ton of video games automatically makes you an addict, then half the people we know, maybe even us, right, would be diagnosed. But science actually tells a much more nuanced story here. So we're going to trace a narrative arc today, going all the way from diagnosis right through to recovery to find out exactly where that line is drawn.
Section 1. When gaming becomes a disorder, defining the problem.
Okay, so internet gaming disorder, or IGD for short, makes a really crucial distinction. It's defined specifically by uncontrollable or persistent gaming behavior. The absolutely crucial point here is that we have to stop confusing gaming disorder with general internet addiction. Think of it this way. The internet is literally just the medium. Whether we're talking about social media, gambling, or gaming, the medium isn't the actual disorder. The specific behavior is. Someone who is struggling with IGD is addicted to the game itself, not just the Wi-Fi connection. Now, to truly get a handle on this, researchers didn't just look at a handful of isolated cases. They conducted a massive cross-sectional study of nearly 29,000 adolescents from middle and high schools in China. By using such an absolutely enormous sample size, the researchers were able to confidently map out the true clinical scale of the disorder. So the data we're looking at here is incredibly robust. And then we actually break down that data, a very clear demographic picture emerges. While the overall prevalence sits at that 4.6% we mentioned earlier, there's a massive gender divide. 7.9% of boys met the criteria for IGD compared to just 2.1% of girls. This tells us that, while absolutely anyone can develop a gaming disorder, young males are currently at a significantly higher risk. And that is vital information for parents, educators, and clinicians to know. Section 2, identifying the red flags, separating passion from pathology. All right, there's a huge misconception here that we need to completely shatter. The DSM-5 lists several criteria for gaming disorder, but listen, they are not all created equal. On one side, you've got things like preoccupation, just thinking about the game a lot, and playing to escape a bad mood. Well, guess what? The data shows these are super common among just regular, everyday gamers. They are not strong predictors of an actual disorder. But on the flip side, the real clinical red flags, those are giving up other activities you used to love and continuing to play despite severe negative consequences. That right there is the fundamental difference between a hobby and an addiction. Let's just let the data speak for itself here. As the researchers noted, advanced statistical models, specifically these things called conditional inference trees, proved that those specific behaviors, giving up activities, suffering negative consequences, and continuing anyway, those are the absolute core drivers of a positive IGD diagnosis. It's not about how much you love the game, it is entirely about what the game is costing you in the real world. To put some numbers to that, if a teenager doesn't show those specific red flags we just talked about, their likelihood of having IGD is barely 2%. Pretty low, right? But if they endorse just one major red flag, like giving up other activities, that jumps to 50%. Now, what happens if you stack all three together? Giving up activities, experiencing negative consequences, and continuing despite problems, the probability of a clinical diagnosis literally skyrockets to 93%. It's an incredibly precise, data-driven diagnostic roadmap. So why does all of this matter? Well, because the real-world impact here is just staggering. Students diagnosed with IGD weren't just playing a little bit more than their peers. They were averaging nearly 30 hours a week, compared to just 5 hours for non-IGD students. And as you might expect, this correlates directly with notably lower academic performance and severe impairments in their social functioning. They aren't just playing, they're actively retreating from life.
Section 3. 4 proven treatments, the path to recovery.
Now, I really want to assure you about the quality of the solutions we're about to look at. Researchers cast a massive net here, evaluating 3,700 different studies on gaming disorder treatments. But through incredibly rigorous, high-level scientific filtering, they narrowed all of that down to just 7 gold standard, randomized controlled trials. Science is strict, and it absolutely demands proof. And from those top-tier trials, 4 scientifically proven therapies emerged for IGD recovery. We've got group counseling, craving behavioral intervention, acceptance and cognitive restructuring, and short-term CBT. Let's actually break down how these therapies get in there and rewire the brain and behavior.
Okay, so group counseling leverages interpersonal empathy to essentially pull gamers out of that isolation, heavily reducing the depression and anxiety that often comes with the disorder. Then there's craving intervention, which uses mindfulness to attack the impulse itself, drastically cutting down actual game time. Next, ACRP, that focuses on cognitive restructuring. This is essentially rebuilding the gamer's self-worth and real-world relationships, which really boost their overall well-being. And finally, short-term CBT gets right to the root of the issue. It changes those maladaptive thoughts like, I'm only successful inside the game, and that directly decreases the overall severity of the disorder. Broadly speaking, you can think of these treatments as falling into 2 main camps. On one hand, behavioral therapy targets the physical and conditioned responses. It's really all about breaking that habit loop when someone sees a gaming cue. On the other hand, psychotherapy treats the underlying mental state. It's working to correct the distorted thoughts that drive a person to escape into a digital world in the first place, all while rebuilding their inner support system.
And the physiological impact of these therapies? It's just absolutely fascinating. By practicing craving behavioral intervention, patients actually enhance their brain's executive control and reduce the salience, or you can think of it as the magnetic pull of gaming cues. These interventions are literally changing how the brain responds to the temptation of a game. It's incredible. Section 4. The road ahead. Standardizing the solution. To actually conquer this growing issue, researchers have laid out a really clear blueprint for the future. First, we've got to permanently stop lumping gaming disorder in with general internet addiction. It requires targeted, specific treatment. The medical community also needs to relentlessly use strict, randomized study designs so we can prove exactly what works. We have to standardize our clinical definitions globally, using major frameworks like the DSM-5 and ICD-11. And crucially, future studies absolutely must ensure diverse clinical samples so that these treatments actually work for everyone, not just specific demographics. Which leaves us with this final, kind of provocative thought to chew on. As our digital worlds become increasingly immersive, almost indistinguishable from reality at times, how exactly will we protect our mental health and the mental health of our kids without demonizing the escapes we genuinely love? It's a tricky balance that we're all going to have to strike. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. Keep learning, stay curious, and we'll see you next time.